knives. I despise negative people, you know. And like I used to say at the end of all my other shows, to pay homage to a dude who inspired me to do the show. His name is Reggie O'Shea. You may know him professionally as Combat Jack. I want y'all to dream those dreams and then man up and woman up and live those dreams. Because life without dreams flow in black and white, and life with dreams flow in technicolor and surround sound. Thank y'all for supporting your boy. Holla later.
In 1910, Harlem was an upper-middle-class white community. But by 1925, it was known as the Mecca of the new Negro. African Americans came to New York, just as they did to many of the great cities of the North, seeking opportunity. During the First World War, their numbers swelled when labor shortages made better-paying jobs available for migrants. Those who came to Harlem found a place where they were free for the first time to express themselves in ways that seemed inconceivable before.
Many of these people had not been able to pursue their art, had not been able to pursue the opportunity to become a novelist, to become a jazz musician. It simply was not available and possible for them in the restricted caste system that they were consigned to in the South. Suddenly here in New York, finally, we can be the people that we imagine ourselves to be.
It would explode into one of the most artistically fertile periods in African American history.
The Harlem Renaissance represents, above all, Black people really for the first time making a claim on being modern as a people. To say that we are here and this is our contribution.
Here, on 136th Street, in the heart of Harlem, some of the most talented newcomers found a temporary home in a rooming house, which its residents humorously nicknamed Niggerati Manor.
Some of the people that lived there included Eric Walren, the Caribbean novelist and short story writer. Zora Neale Hurston passed through there. Langston Hughes spent time there. They all ended up putting together a kind of salon. It was right here.
Who invented this crazy term, Niggerati?
Zora Neale Hurston, playing with the term literati, and saying, if they're the literati downtown, we must be the niggerati uptown.
Out of Niggerati Manor came one of the most provocative publications of the Renaissance, a literary journal called Fire.
In that single issue of Fire, the first story in there is Wallace Thurman's Cordelia the Crude. It's about a prostitute, Richard Bruce Nugent's sexually exploratory vignettes, Smoke, Lilies, and Jade. In terms of exploring a kind of queer eroticism, it's one of the stories in the Renaissance, one of the few that does that, that goes there. Harlem came to represent a kind of oasis of permissibility. There are things that could go on in Harlem that could not go on elsewhere.
Harlem's reputation spread throughout the country. Outsiders were drawn to its clubs and cabarets. Races could mingle here in ways that were illegal in much of the rest of the country.
I am a proud partner of Car Marshal. If you are interested in a new or used car, please check out Car Marshal. Click on the link in my description box below. No credit check, no cosigner. That's Car Marshal. The numbers game was an illegal form of gambling in the black communities from the early 1920s until the lottery as you know it today. It all took over as legalized gambling was instituted. No amount of money was too low to place a bet. but not everyone could afford to pay $1 on the number. Most people still found a way to pay something. A quarter could bring a lucky player $150 back, and that was enough to buy a room full of furniture. A dime could earn you about $60. That was enough for a 3-bedroom apartment. A nickel could bring you about $30. At this time, that was enough for back-to-school clothes. A penny could make you about $6. That was definitely enough to get you some groceries. That change added up to dollars. According to testimony given to the Seabury investigation held in New York City in 1931, the numbers racket in Harlem was bringing in more than $50 million a year. That was a very large amount, especially considering the fact that the country was in the middle of the Great Depression. The numbers game was broken up into 4 different parts: the numbers players, the numbers runners, the numbers controllers, and the number bankers. The players were the people who placed the bets, aka playing the lottery. The numbers runners, the number runner was someone who came around to collect and to write down the bets. The controller would then turn over the daily receipts to the banker. A man named Casper Holstein was one of the key players in the progression of Harlem. He was the money man behind many people during the Harlem Renaissance, many businesses. He even funded Marcus Garvey's UNIA. He also played a huge part in Harlem's policy banking, one of the biggest parts. Casper Holstein was the one who created the clearinghouse numbers game. Shortly after midnight on September 22nd, 1928, Casper Holstein was kidnapped by 4 white men disguised as police officers. Those men were allegedly sent by Dutch Schultz, and he was held for ransom. Casper Holstein was beaten with a blackjack and bound and gagged. The next afternoon, employees at the Turk Club he owned received a call from the kidnappers demanding $17,000 for his release. Nobody talked him down. They were just ready to cough up the money. This right here sent off all kinds of bells and whistles and alarms in Dutch Schultz's head, because he was surprised that Negroes were able to get their hands on the money that fast. Now, surprised that nobody tried to negotiate him down. The amount the kidnappers demanded was $17,000, so they raised it up to $50,000, which they said it was paid. But later it was denied by Casper Holstein. He denied that the payment was ever made, and he was released. That right there was all Dutch Schultz needed before he joined the numbers game. He realized that this was big business. A man named Alex Pompez was another prominent figure in Harlem's progression. Alex Pompez was a Cuban from Florida. He moved to Harlem in 1910. He owned the Cuban Stars baseball team of the Eastern Colored League, and he also owned the New York Cubans of the Negro League. He was another top policy banker. In February of 1924, Bumpy Johnson was escorting Alex home one night after kicking it in Spanish Harlem. A gunman popped out of nowhere attempting to rob him. Bumpy pulled out a switchblade and started slicing him up. Bumpy sliced the man up until he dropped the gun and fell to the ground. Bumpy pushed Alex into the car and began slicing him and poking him up again. A police officer was nearby and heard all the madness. Bumpy tossed his knife into the gutter. The police officer pulled up and he asked what happened, but Bumpy gave him nothing. The officer then approached the car to talk to Alex Pompez. Bumpy blocked his path and told him that Pompez doesn't speak English very well. The officer told Bumpy to move, but Bumpy refused. Bumpy then told his buddy who was nearby to hop into the driver's seat and get Pompez out of there. Bumpy punched the police officer in the face and a tussle began. It was a one-hand fight because Bumpy had to cover the officer's gun so he wouldn't draw his weapon. During the tussle, 4 other officers arrived on the scene and they all took Bumpy down. Bumpy was arrested and charged with assaulting a police officer, resisting arrest, and attempted murder because of the man he sliced up. But Alex Pompez was a man plugged with many connections, and Bumpy only got off with disorderly conduct. A heavy hitter from Chicago named Ulysses Rollins came to Harlem as Dutch Schultz's new top henchman, and he made it known that he was going to take Bumpy Johnson down. Bumpy laughed when he heard of the news, but Bumpy did take him serious, because Ulysses Rollins had a serious rep. The war in Harlem continued to wage, and in the summer of 1935, Bumpy and Ulysses finally had a face-to-face. Bumpy sliced him, poked him up, and beat him so badly that his face and body was gashed, and one of his eyeballs was hanging from the socket by ligaments. An ambulance was called, and although everyone thought that it was a wrap for Rollins, he proved that his tough reputation was correct. He checked himself out of the hospital that same night. With this man's whole head and face covered in bandages, he went looking for Bumpy Johnson. He found Bumpy enjoying himself at a local restaurant. He pulled out his gun, took aim at his head, and fired a shot. The shot was so close that it knocked off Bumpy's hat, but it killed a woman who was sitting right next to Bumpy. An off-duty police officer was sitting in the restaurant, and Ulysses Rollins was arrested. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comment section. Parents, please subscribe to History with No Chaser for Kids. Just type in HWNC space for kids.
Thank you for tuning in again. I want to invite you guys to one of the dopest shows in the universe tomorrow. It's called Sunday Night Love Jones. It's by my main man, D Great. It's on X Squad Radio. With him and Sister Shelly Q and Mocha. They will have a slow jam battle. If you know anything about D Great, it's always going to be entertaining. It's always going to be awesome music. It's going to be a battle like the Teddy Riley Babyface battle, but it's going to be fans of music picking their favorite songs. Again, Follow my man D Greatest on South Central.